Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into something that, yeah, might sound hell, a bit legalistic maybe.
It can seem that way for sure.
But it's really the foundational stuff, the absolute nuts and bolts rules that businesses in Australia have to follow just to, well, get off the ground.
It's the regulatory bedrock, essentially. Everything else builds on this.
Exactly. And we've got a good set of sources here really digging into registering names, sorting out taxes, dealing with those local rules. It's all in there.
hmm And for anyone curious about how businesses really work day to day, understanding this is just, well, it's key.
It really is. They might seem like just hoops to jump through, but
Yeah.
yeah, you need to know this stuff.
Absolutely.
So, our mission for this deep dive, let's try and cut through the jargon, pull out the absolute must-know info from these sources.
Yeah, the core concepts, the why behind it all, the crucial steps.
Right, so you can feel informed without getting, totally swamped.
Because it can feel overwhelming otherwise.
For sure. And while it sounds maybe a bit dry, administrative,
Yeah, administrative is one word for it.
there are actually some pretty interesting reasons why these rules exist. And, like our sources highlight, the impact they have goes way beyond just, ticking boxes.
Oh, definitely. It can really shape how a business operates and succeeds.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where do we start? The big picture.
Yeah, let's start there. The sources make it really clear. Any business, even something that seems pretty simple like that Cafe del Sol example they used,
Right.
has to navigate this whole web of legal requirements. Registration, licenses, permits, approvals, taxes. It's the whole package.
And you're dealing with different levels of government too, right?
Yeah.
Federal, state, local.
Exactly. And that can feel, well, frustrating. It's a common hurdle, a bit of a maze sometimes.
Yeah, you can see why. But what if you?
Mm-hmm.
What if you don't get this right? Is it just a slap on the wrist?
Definitely not. Our sources paint a pretty stark picture there.
Okay.
The consequences aren't trivial. We're talking losing customers, damage to your reputation.
Because you don't seem legit.
Precisely. Or facing pretty hefty fines, financial penalties. And in serious cases, the government could actually revoke your right to trade altogether.
Wow. Okay, so it gets real fast.
Very quickly. But what's fascinating, and the sources bring this out, is flipping that around.
How so?
Well, obviously compliance avoids those penalties, but it goes further. The sources suggest that observing the law, maybe even going beyond the minimum legal expectations,
Right.
that can actually lead to a business outperforming its competitors.
Really? So it's not just a cost, it's a potential advantage.
Potentially, yes. It builds trust, efficiency. It frames compliance less as a burden and more as maybe a strategic path.
Interesting perspective. Okay, so if you're starting out, where do you begin with all this? What's step one?
Well, one of the very first things is identity. Your business needs its legal name and usually its online address. The sources really zero in on these two distinct things.
Okay, so you've got the formal business name registration and then the domain name for your website. Two separate pieces.
That's right. Let's tackle the business name registration first. According to the materials, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, handles this nationally.
ASIC.
Okay.
And what's the rule? Do you have to register?
The general rule is yes, business names must be registered. There's one main exception: if you're operating solely under your own personal name.
Like if I start a business just called Host Speaker.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
it's just your first name and last name, registration is optional.
But there's always a but.
There is, and it's a crucial one. If you add anything to that personal name, like Puri Ltd. Or Motors or and Associates and Co. anything at all, then that name must be registered. No longer optional.
Right, got it. And why? What's the point of registering the name?
It's sort of twofold, according to the sources. One, it helps stop others trading under a name that's confusingly similar to yours.
Okay.
And maybe more importantly for consumers, it helps people identify who actually owns the business trading under that name. It creates transparency, accountability.
Makes sense. So practically, how do you do it? What do you need?
You'll need an Australian business number, an ABN, or at least the application reference number showing you've applied for one.
Okay.
And before you apply to register the name, you absolutely must search the ASIC register online first. Check if the name you want is even available. Someone might already have it.
Good tip. Check first. Now, there was a nuance mentioned, wasn't there, about protection?
Yes, important point. Registering your business name with ASIC doesn't automatically give you exclusive rights to use that name as a brand.
Ah, okay. So it's for trading identification, but not full brand protection.
Kind of. It stops someone else registering the exact same or very similar name for trading purposes, but it doesn't necessarily stop someone using a similar name as, say, a product brand in a different field.
So if the name itself, the brand identity, is really crucial for your business,
Yeah.
what then?
That's where trademark registration comes in. The sources point to this as the stronger legal protection for your actual brand. The name, the logo.
And that's handled somewhere else.
Yes, by a different federal agency, IP Australia. It falls under specific intellectual property laws, like the Trademarks Act. Trademarking is about protecting your unique brand asset against confusing use by others, potentially much more broadly.
Okay, a different level of protection. And what about company names? Briefly.
Right, the sources touch on this. A company doesn't have to have a specific name initially. It can just use its unique Australian company number, the ACN, that ASIC gives it.
It's operate under the number.
Yep. But if it does choose a name, that name has to show its legal structure. So a private limited company needs proprietary limited or PD Ltd at the end.
And that registration happens when?
It's part of the company registration process itself. You register the company and its name, if it has one, together with ASIC.
Okay, so that's the legal name sorted. Moving to the online identity domain names. What exactly is a domain name?
Simply put, it's the address for a website on the internet. Your online street address, basically. It's what people type into their browser to find you.
And these days, having an online presence is, well, pretty essential for most businesses.
Absolutely vital. So the domain name is key. And choosing it wisely matters. Unique, represents the business, easy to remember and spell, ideally.
The sources mentioned an interesting tactic, registering multiple domains. Why would you do that?
Yeah, that can be strategic. Registering variations may be common misspellings or different extensions like .com and .com.au helps customers find you if they type something slightly off.
Ah, like a safety net.
Exactly. And it can also be defensive. Stops competitors or others grabbing similar names that could confuse your customers or divert traffic.
Smart. How do you check if one's free and register it?
You check the domain registry online, see if it's available. Then you register it through accredited resellers or registrars. The Australian Domain Administration website, AUDA, is the place to find legitimate providers.
And cost-wise, is it expensive?
Well, and compared to building and hosting a full website, which can run into thousands,
Right.
registering the domain name itself is generally pretty cheap. The sources say usually between, say, $10 and $100 per year.
Okay, so relatively low cost for a pretty critical piece of online real estate.
Definitely a small investment for what you get.
All right, so you've identified your business, given it a name, got its online address. How does the government keep track of earnings and, well, collected share? Now we get into taxes.
Ah, yes, taxation. The way the government funds everything it does by collecting money from individuals and businesses. It's fundamental.
And complex, I imagine.
It can be. Many different taxes can apply, depending on your structure, your activities. Familiarity is crucial. The Australian Taxation Office, the ATO, is the main federal body collecting these.
Okay, the ATO. And you need some kind of ID for tax purposes.
Yes, the tax file number, or TFN. It's a unique number from the ATO. If you're a partnership or a company, the business entity itself needs its own TFN.
And if you're a sole trader?
Then you typically just use your personal TFN for your business income. You can often apply for the TFN when you apply for your ABN.
Okay. Let's break down some of the main taxes businesses face. Income tax first.
Right. Federal income tax. It's levied on the taxable income a business earns, but it's calculated differently depending on the structure.
How so?
Companies generally pay a flat rate on their taxable income. Currently, it's 30% for larger businesses, but there's a lower rate, 25% for companies with an annual turnover under $50 million.
A flat rate for companies. What about individuals, like sole traders?
Individuals pay tax at a progressive rate.
Progressive. What does that actually mean in practice?
Good question. It means the rate of tax increases as your income increases. Unlike the company flat rate, you don't pay the same percentage on all your earnings.
So it's tiered.
Exactly. The sources give the specific brackets. Income up to a certain threshold, like $18,200, is tax-free. Then the next chunk of income is taxed at one rate, the chunk above that at a higher rate, and so on.
So you only pay the higher rate on the income in that higher bracket.
Precisely. Not on your entire income. That difference, flat rate for companies, progressive for individuals, is a really key concept from the sources.
Okay, that makes the progressive system clearer. What other federal taxes might businesses encounter?
Well, depending on what you do, others might kick in. There's pay-as-you-go withholding or PAYG withholding.
That's tax taken from employee wages.
Yes, taken directly from wages by the employer. Though, legally, it's considered a tax imposed on the employee, which the employer just collects and passes on.
Right. And the big one everyone knows, GST.
Goods and services tax. Yep. It's a 10% tax on most goods and services consumed in Australia. It's imposed on the consumer ultimately, but collected by the business at the point of sale.
Does every business have to deal with GST?
No, and this is crucial, especially for smaller businesses. You are only required to register for GST if your annual turnover hits $75,000 or more in a financial year.
75,000. Okay. Below that, it's optional?
Correct. Below 75K, registration is optional.
Good to know. And fringe benefits tax, FBT.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's a tax on non-cash benefits provided to employees instead of salary. Things like giving an employee a car for personal use or a cheap loan.
And who pays FBT? The employee.
No, interestingly, FBT is imposed on the employer, not the employee receiving the benefit.
Okay. Employer pays. Are there state taxes too? Another layer?
Yep, another layer. Major state taxes mentioned in the sources include stamp duty.
On documents?
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
On transaction documents, like when you buy property or shares, it's imposed on the individual or business doing the transaction. And there's also land tax.
An annual tax?
Yes, an annual tax levied by state governments on the owner of land, usually above a certain value threshold.
Wow. Okay. So all this federal tax, income tax, GST, PAYG,
Yeah.
how does it get reported?
It gets reported periodically on a form called the Business Activity Statement, or BAS.
The BAS. Who files that?
Any business that's registered for GST. So if you've crossed that 75K turnover threshold,
Yeah.
you must lodge a BAS.
And what does it do?
It's how you report your obligations to the ATO. You report the GST you've collected, the GST credits you're claiming back, any PAYG withholding from employees, and sometimes installments towards your company or personal income tax. It's how you reconcile and pay what you owe.
It definitely sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It absolutely can be, especially since tax rules can change. Keeping up is a real challenge.
So what's the advice?
The sources wisely advise seeking help. You can get information directly from the ATO website or helpline. But for anything complex or just for peace of mind, talking to a registered tax agent or an accountant is often the best bet.
Yeah, professional advice seems smart here. Can save a lot of trouble later.
Definitely. An area where getting it right up front is really valuable.
Okay, so we've covered federal and state levels, names, domains, taxes. Let's shift down now to the local government requirements. These seem important, but maybe easily missed.
Very easily missed, but absolutely critical, especially if your business operates from physical premises or uses land.
So not just online businesses.
Right. The sources stress this. Any business using premises or land must get approval from the local council before they start trading from that location.
Before trading, what happens if you don't?
Big problems. The council could force you to close down. Imagine setting everything up, spending money, investing time, only to be shut down because you didn't get that initial local approval. A huge waste.
Ouch. Okay. What kinds of things do local councils control?
Quite a lot, actually. They control land zoning, what activities are allowed where. They handle applications for new developments or alterations to buildings, fire safety regulations, parking rules, health regulations.
Health regulations, right.
And even things like the size, shape, and location of your business signs.
Signs, too.
Okay.
The sources highlighted two areas in particular, zoning and health services. Let's talk zoning first.
Zoning regulations are mainly about local planning. They aim to stop businesses from negatively impacting residential areas or other sensitive zones. Councils have planning schemes that map out different zones, residential, industrial, commercial, mixed use, etc., and specify what's allowed in each.
So the key takeaway for a business owner looking for a place is?
Talk to the local council about zoning before you sign a lease or buy a property. Absolutely crucial. And not just for what you plan to do now, but also think about future plans, like expansion.
Good point. There was an example in the sources.
Yeah, good one. A manufacturing business using heavy machinery, maybe wanting to operate 24 hours. That kind of operation needs specific industrial zoning. You couldn't just set that up next to houses because of noise, traffic, general disruption. The council wouldn't approve it there.
Makes total sense. Balancing act between business and community. What about health services at the local level?
Local councils are key here, too. They enforce health regulations, often based on state laws, like the Food Act in Victoria was mentioned as an example. They set the standards businesses need to meet to get licenses, especially premises dealing with food.
So which businesses really need to pay attention to this?
Primarily those handling food.
Yeah.
Cafes, restaurants, butchers, bakeries, caterers, food manufacturers, anyone preparing or selling food for consumption.
And how do councils check if businesses are meeting these standards?
Through inspections, council health officers visit premises regularly, and the sources note these inspections are often unannounced. They can just turn up.
What are they looking for?
Things like food handling practices, hygiene standards, cleanliness, proper food storage, temperature control, pest control, waste disposal, the general state of the premises.
And if they find problems?
Typically, the business gets a notice outlining the issues and a time frame to fix them, to bring things up to standard.
Chance to improve.
Usually, yes. But if the issues are serious or if they aren't fixed properly, the council does have the power to issue fines or even order the premises to close down temporarily or sometimes permanently.
Serious consequences again. Any other businesses inspected like this?
The sources also mention local councils might register and inspect other types of premises where hygiene and safety are vital, like accommodation businesses or even hairdressers.
Right, makes sense. Wow, okay, that's covered a huge amount of ground. From like the very beginning, name and online identity, through the maze of federal and state taxes, right down to these really crucial local rules about where you can operate and how, like zoning and health.
It's definitely a multi-layered landscape.
Yeah.
Much more involved than just thinking up a catchy name.
And understanding all this isn't just about, staying out of trouble or avoiding fines. As the sources suggested, getting this foundational stuff right.
Can actually be part of building a successful, trusted business. It might even help you outperform competitors who perhaps cut corners. It's about building on solid ground.
Exactly. So whether you're maybe prepping to start something yourself or just catching up on how this all fits together, or even if you're just curious, getting your head around this regulatory environment is really key to making informed choices in the business world.
It really is the essential scaffolding, isn't it? It supports the whole structure of any legitimate business operation.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought maybe for you to take away and mull over. We've seen these multiple layers of government rules, the complexity, but also this idea that going beyond basic compliance might be beneficial. So how might a business shift its mindset? How could engaging proactively with regulations, understanding them deeply, become less of a chore you just have to do?
And more of a strategic advantage, a way to build trust, operate smoothly, maybe even innovate responsibly.
Exactly. Food for thought.
Yeah.
And just for you listening, what part of this whole regulatory puzzle we've unpacked today stands out as maybe the most surprising or perhaps the most complex piece to you? Something to think about.